In this episode, we speak with Dave Mowry, Executive Chairman and CEO of Breg, a musculoskeletal health medical device company providing orthopedic bracing, cold therapy solutions, and software-enabled services that support durable medical equipment management. Breg works with a large orthopedic footprint, partnering with thousands of clinics and providers and distributing product globally through a network spanning nearly 60 countries. Dave stepped in as interim CEO in May 2024 and was appointed CEO in September 2024 while continuing as chairman. He brings more than 30 years of medical device leadership experience, including CEO roles at Cutera and at Vyaire Medical, and he previously led Tornier as president and CEO prior to its acquisition. I am your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the executive chairman of Market Insight Media and managing partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Key Executives, a podcast for driven executives and business operators. Our podcast covers all topics related to effective business leadership, from strategy and culture to products and services to sales and marketing and everything in between. In the minutes ahead, we'll share with you unique insights and tactics from some of today's most accomplished and inspiring executives.
Dave, so great to see you again. It's been about a month and change since we last saw each other. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
It is totally my pleasure. I really enjoyed the event. I thought it was executed with real excellence and enjoyed it. This was our first time to be there, and it was truly an enjoyable event to attend. So thank you for having us.
Oh, that's so great to hear and great to feature your folks and your company. Maybe to kick off, for the benefit of our audience, we can talk a little bit about what Breg does. And I'm particularly interested in kind of the history of the company, like how did it get started? And it probably goes back quite a ways.
It does. It goes back to 1989. First, I would say that, Breg is really a trusted brand. It's a premier provider of what we would call specialty non-surgical orthopedic products. So these are typically bracing and support or ancillary support devices such as cold and compression devices for post-surgical treatment, or perhaps even DVT prevention post-surgical.
Yeah, I was refreshing on the various products you have. I was on your website. I felt like I was shopping on Amazon because there's so many products.
Well, there's such a focus when you think about orthopedics, and I've been in orthopedics, give or take 30 years of my career. And it's really a fun place to operate, frankly, as an industry provider, because there's quite a bit of fellowship between us and the providers. And our job is really to give them the tools that they need to treat their patients. And I think when we think about how different doctors operate, how different practices support their patients, there's a broad need of different products that support, I would say, a broad range of orthopedic applications, from prophylactic preventative bracing to post-surgical bracing, whether that be arthroscopy or arthroplasty, which is the joint replacement, or even trauma surgery, to even recovery post-injury. And so it's a broad range. And then you think about all the different joints, the lefts, the rights, and some people want to have dynamic bracing. Some people want very safe and supportive things. So it's a broad range of applications that we have to provide products to.
Mm-hmm. Curious which products are bought in volume the most. I imagine the knee braces, maybe some of the ankle products, foot products. I'm just curious generally what the breakout of, when you look at your overall product portfolio, which ones are the perennial kind of big sellers?
Well, it's very interesting because if you think about it across the different applications, we've got kind of a pretty good blend. I would say that hip and knee support represents maybe 25 to 30% of our revenues. Cold therapy, which is the application of cold and compression, as well as DVT, represents about 20% of our revenue. Upper extremities like arm slings, wrist braces, elbow extension and protection, that represents about 20%. And then foot and ankle represents about 20%. So the remaining 10 is spine, which is the fastest growing segment. So we have a lot of balance across the joints, and that corresponds, if you will, to both surgical volumes and intervention needs.
Mm-hmm. I guess the product is primarily distributed through kind of your relationships with the providers. Are there some independent sellers as well?
Yeah, we use a hybrid mix of independent and direct sales reps across the US. And we generally are selling into hospitals, trauma centers, as well as clinics, orthopedic clinics. So we have a broad range and multiple call points that are offering care and support to the patient. The one area that we probably have under indexed to is, I'll call it the physical therapist and trainer rooms
Mhm.
associated with athletic teams. And we have a lot of products for their use, but it's probably been an area of less focus for Breg historically.
And so I can imagine, just reading up on your bio, you're an avid sports fan. So this is probably a good area for you to be operating in. No pun intended. I mean, there's athletics all over this.
Yeah, I would say between athletic trainers and physical therapists, they're probably the largest subset of customers that we have. You would think it's the surgeon. The surgeon makes recommendations, but the reality is these products have to be appropriately sized and fit by professionals. And we offer some of that service ourselves. But in most cases, these are done by providers within the either the hospital chains or the trauma centers or the clinics by physical therapists or athletic trainers. So yeah, they're a large group of our clientele, if you will.
One of my good friends here runs one of the, I'd say, larger orthopedic groups across central New Jersey, if not larger, maybe northern New Jersey as well. And they always sponsor the kids' sports teams. And it's incredible how many kids are getting injured all the time. They're going to his orthopedic group. So he's a
Yeah.
very trusted member of the community. But yeah, so to understand kind of the company and the growth profile of it, it seems like you have a regular cadence of maybe, growing your existing product portfolio, growing the reach of your existing product portfolio, but then also maybe innovating new products.
Yeah, I think about new product development as kind of a portfolio management perspective, RJ. And so like I think you have to have some breakthrough innovation that is continually pushing the science. So some of the braces we provide use different events or different mechanisms, if you will, in order to provide support for recovery, faster recovery. Look at everyone's looking to get faster and more full recovery post-surgically to any sports medicine injury, which is basically soft tissue injury, tendons, muscles, et cetera, ligaments. And everyone wants to get full recovery or at least as close to full recovery as possible. The interesting thing is while we see the athletes, the professional athletes getting injured on TV, the vast majority of these injuries are happening, unfortunately, to more folks like myself, a little older and maybe shouldn't be doing the things we do, pushing too hard or et cetera, Achilles tendons, et cetera, and then a lot of young kids get injured because they overexercise or overuse certain parts of the body. Anyway, we provide that support through these braces. And it's a great place to be because you are providing an extension of the physician's care and the ability for them to provide support for their patients through the recovery phase post-surgically.
How competitive is this space? I mean, are there other products out there that you find that you're consistently bumping up against?
Well, look, I don't think any market that's worth its weight is not competitive. There's always somebody offering something. Innovation is critical. And so I think, we try to do some innovation in the key areas of hip and knee in particular, a little bit on shoulder because there's so much injury around rotator cuff and even Tommy John surgery around the elbow. So we see a lot of opportunity to continue to expand, but competition's tough and people are always looking to innovate and disrupt. And I think, our job is to be on that cutting edge of technology, but also to offer a broad portfolio that makes it easy and efficient for the physician to provide the care that their patients deserve.
Hmm. Do these products or maybe a portion of the products, do they have to go through FDA or do all of them have to go through FDA?
Any medical device in the US requires FDA approval. Now, that being said, there's class 1, 2, and 3. And depending on the nature of the device, it requires something as simple as a letter to file that shows that you've done the appropriate design controls and validations, up to and including where you do a pre-market approval clinical evaluation and submit that to the FDA for a panel review. For us, the good news and the bad news is that we're on the lower end of that product categorization. So it's easy to get approval and go to market. But that's both a blessing and a curse. It makes it easy to compete and easy for new entrants to get into the marketplace. So we don't have the protection of the FDA barriers of entry that a lot of good devices have. That being said, our innovation and our ability to provide service and support to the field is the differentiator.
Now, I think there was transition of the company ownership, and then you also came in, I guess, somewhat recently, a couple of years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe the change in ownership or financial backing, as well as your entry? Was that happening kind of in parallel, or did that happen at different points?
They're not totally independent. So the company had been owned by a private equity firm for a considerable amount of time. The company was founded, by the way, back in 1989 on its cold therapy product, and then have built out the rest of the portfolio in order to offer broadly. And through those transitions of ownership and what have you, we ended up in the hands of a private equity organization who I think does a fabulous job, actually, as a private equity owner of businesses. Unfortunately, Breg did not prepare well or survive through the pandemic very well from a supply chain perspective. And I think it became trying to catch a falling knife here from a financial perspective. So a lot of the processes had been, I'll say, undercut, and they didn't have the financial strength and liquidity that they needed. And they went out and they brought on some debt as a company in order to shore it up. And unfortunately, they weren't able to meet their debt covenants, and the ownership transferred. I have to tell you, HPS is the owner of the business, HPS, which is a BlackRock company, and they are amazing to work with. I mean, they are professional bankers and debt holders that understand the need to restructure deals and support management, and they've been nothing short of fabulous. That said, I came on the board prior to the ownership transition. I think HPS, they had tripped a covenant with HPS, and HPS had a board seat to appoint, and they chose me as an independent. I was not an employee of HPS, and I came on the board to give advice and counsel, but I think that it was too far along at that point. So the ownership transferred at a debt conversion that the prior owners couldn't meet the covenant, and they flipped the keys over to HPS, and ownership transferred. And HPS asked if I would chair the new board and help in a transition, which I immediately agreed to, knowing the quality of people at HPS. Our intent was to kind of coach the management team up and help. And unfortunately, there probably was less talent and capability in certain roles, and we had to make some changes. And I actually came out of retirement as an operator to come back to this role. And I have to tell you, I'm having a blast. One of the best roles I've ever been in, most fun, and we're doing great stuff. But long story short, we've turned over the management team, we've upgraded the talent, we've top graded our functional leaders, and reconstituted the board with some amazing board members that are operators of significant skill. And I think we've really got the company back on the right track. We've turned around profitability. We've got liquidity back to where it belongs. And the company's on an amazing trajectory, and couldn't be prouder of this team for what they've done.
Culture is always a big part to turning around a situation. And, I'm always hesitant to mention the word culture because it's always this soft, buzzy phrase that people will throw around. But I mean, it seems like you probably quickly assessed the leadership and quickly assessed the areas that needed to be fixed. Like, how much of that is like you've been around the block a bunch of times and you can quickly see like the areas to fix?
I don't know if that was a really nice way of saying I'm old.
Experienced.
Yeah. I tend to lean on the experience versus the old, but no, the reality is I've been around the block a few times, and I really do enjoy a turnaround activity because I think there's always a nugget of gold in a business, or several nuggets. And I think I found the same thing here. And frankly, culture was a lever here, not an obstacle. They had invested early and heavily, prior leadership, with a group called Culture Partners, and had built a culture that was, I think, a lever that we could use to redirect the energies and efforts of the business. So I think it's been a good thing, and it's been a sustainable element of success over the last 2 years. The people here are pretty amazing, but I would say that some of the management decisions that were being made over the last 3 to 5 years were somewhat suspect. And I think, once you start reversing some of these bad decisions and you unleash the power of the people and the team to go do the things that they know they should do, it's amazing how quickly the recovery happens. This has been a very different turnaround than other ones I've been through, frankly.
Mm.
Most times you have to really re-engineer everything. This has been just kind of cutting away the waste, realigning to the right objectives, narrowing the focus a little bit to the vital few instead of the useful many. And it's amazing how quickly the company's come around because of the people.
You went to West Point, and I'm always curious how much of your leadership philosophy and how you comport yourself in that role comes from West Point, or was it more like early foundation and then you built on that with subsequent experiences? Like I've met some very talented people from West Point. Maybe they had these skills like already before they even went to the school. It was just like ingrained in them, but curious the influence of going there.
Well, I feel very indebted to the academy. I think the foundations of learning at a very young age have left long-lasting impressions of what good leadership looks like to me. That being said, I think you pick up things along the way. I've worked for some amazing leaders that have not had that same military experience or background, but they've picked up other things. And I think you're kind of a composition of all of those skills and talents you've extracted along the way. But I think the foundations certainly come from an understanding of what motivates people and what provides them the sense of support that you need to provide for them to take the risks to do the things that they need to do.
We're entering close to the tail end of the conversation, but before we head into kind of the final questions, one thing I'd like to touch on is where you see the company heading and what you're aiming for, I guess near term and long term.
That's a great question. When I took this role, like I said earlier, I came out of retirement. So like I don't have a lot of shelf life personally. I'm kind of in my mid 60s now and I'm trying to be very thoughtful of creating the right sustainable organization here. And, maybe I wax poetically because I think of the legacy you provide at this point. But, it's obvious that HPS, while they're a great owner, they're a reluctant long-term owner. They're not a private equity firm and they don't have the wherewithal to manage an unlimited number of assets. So I think there's likely a transaction in the coming future, whether it be 12, 24, 36 months, it's something reasonable for them. They've been in it now as owners almost 2 years, and I think they originally thought 3 to 5. So I think we're right in that same window. But I think what we will have to transpire and transact to the next owner is the sustainability of not only a great business, but the next chapter of growth and opportunities for them to take advantage of. Really, no private equity wants to take on a business that's reached its potential, right? That's not what they look to do. And I think there's great opportunity here for this to be used as either a building block for other acquisitions and scale, consolidation within the space, or even an opportunity to kind of leverage further improvements to generate greater profit on the existing revenues. So all these are great opportunities. My role, I think, will likely come to an end at the next transaction from the C-suite, but I would love to stay on in some sort of advisory capacity and help because I really have a lot of love for this business and for the people.
Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
It's funny. You can ask that question every day, and I can give you a different answer along the way. A lot of people like to talk about their parents, but I like to talk about my coaches. So I'm going to talk about a guy named Ed Reed. Ed was my swim coach, and I swam through high school and through college as well. And Ed was my, I think you would call him my AAU coach at the time. Now you'd say US swimming coach. And he was the coach at Brown University. And he was just an incredible guy, a mentor, a leader, but he found ways to get out of you what you never thought you could do. And I always remember some of the lessons from him when I talk with younger folks and how to get them to do things they don't think is possible. Ed is now in his early 80s and is still actively competing in swimming in the master's level and puts me to shame.
How did he get into kind of your psyche?
I think sometimes people have personalities that just blend, right? And he was a pretty stoic guy in a lot of ways, but when he allowed his emotions to come through, you could tell there was love and commitment to the people that he worked with. And he was somewhat selective. He didn't coach the masses. He coached few exceptionally well. And I was benefited by having that relationship. And I still think he made me a profoundly better swimmer, but a better person even still.
Mm-hmm. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah, there's a group in Minnesota, and while I moved out of Minnesota to Southern California, we're still involved with it, and it's called Firefighters for Healing. And it was started by a firefighter who was, badly burnt in a blaze going in to save other people. And it's a cause that's really focused on supporting people that are hurt in fires, and namely young kids. And they send kids, burn victims, to summer camp. They do rehabilitation for those kids. And then they also support parents and family members who are visiting burn unit patients in hospitals. And they have a home that they've built, and my wife and I have donated generously to put a room into that hotel, if you will, that they've built for this. And it's just a great cause. And it's based in Minnesota, but they treat the 5-state area: Wisconsin, Minnesota, Dakotas, and Iowa.
Wonderful. Dave, want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
You guys do a great job, and it's really a pleasure to be one of the companies that is on your ranks, and we look forward to more deeper engagements with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.